We truly believe in the value of space as the next great research laboratory. This is the best possible time to be alive in human spaceflight. The average Mars mission profile is about 3 to 5 years. I know I have very big shoes to fill. So, when we talk about access to spaceflight, historically it has only been possible to go through space through a space agency. And now, with the rise of commercial access to space and in commercial spaceflight, we're seeing multiple paths towards accessing space. And so, we see the path as going as an explorer, as a tourist, as a contest winner, as an employee of a company. And what we do at our research institute is focus on research. We truly believe in the value of space as the next great research laboratory. And so we're defining that experience through our work, through our previous space flights, and through my upcoming space flight. So I often like to say that this is the best possible time to be alive in human spaceflight. The numbers of discoveries that we're having on a almost daily basis now is incredible when we look at revelations in physiology that we didn't previously know about, when we look at countermeasures, when we look at enabling technologies that can support humans in space, and then take the insights from those innovations to help support humans back on Earth. And one great example is several of my friends and colleagues yesterday were behind the team that were behind the first X-rays in space that were just sent back to Earth. And that just happened yesterday in a way that's new and portable. And so having that type of technology can potentially also be applied to remote and resource limited areas on Earth. And so when we talk about my own mission, we definitely have a focus on biomedical sciences. We are building on some of the previous work we did from our institute's first space flight. So I was a scientific lead and medical lead on that mission, and we had a number of biomedical payloads. And this time we're focusing on women's health, neurosciences, and health technology that can support both astronauts in space as well as potentially support healthcare challenges on Earth. So those are really great questions because they get into the nitty-gritty of what we can both expect when it comes to challenges in the zero-G or weightless environment, as well as the potential benefits of doing science in the weightless environment. So when we talk about physiological or body changes to the space flight environment, that includes exposure to weightlessness. And the summary is that every single bodily system is affected by exposure to microgravity. So our bones lose density, our muscles lose mass, our fluids shift upward. And that includes affecting how the cerebrospinal fluid, or that juice that bathes our brains and spines, how that drains in the microgravity environment versus in 1G conditions on Earth. And so as we spend more time in space, in fact, as we approach what we call long duration space flight or flights over 30 days, we see this constellation of symptoms that doesn't happen in every astronaut, but that can affect the central nervous systems, including the eyes and the brains of certain astronauts. And that pattern includes changes in the eye shape. So the globe becomes more flattened. There can be more wrinkles at the back of our eye. The optic nerve that feeds from the brain into the eye can become more swollen. And that can be a result of increased pockets of pressure that aren't evenly distributed around the brain. And part of that mechanism is thought to be secondary to impaired drainage in the zero-G environment compared to being on Earth. Well, all of that sounds scary, and you might be saying, well, why go to space at all? Well, there's also benefits and advantages to being in the microgravity environment, and we can take advantage of some of those changes to do interesting and novel science and generate new materials or new products in a way that we aren't able to on Earth. So when we talk about protein crystal growth on Earth versus in space, in the zero-G environment, protein crystals grow more slowly and more symmetrically. And so that can give new materials different properties. And so one really key and interesting and exciting example is a new formulation of a chemotherapy agent called Keytruda. So on Earth, this chemotherapy agent is used to treat certain kinds of cancers like mesothelioma or cervical cancer or head and neck cancers. But the problem is when you are a patient going in for your monthly infusion, that requires going to a hospital for a day at a time and getting an IV infusion. So as a patient, this is time away from your usual quality of life, and there's also lots of costs associated with that. This new version of Keytruda that was grown in the zero-G environment is more shelf stable because of its increased protein crystal growth structure. So that means it has a different viscosity. And by that, its properties mean that it doesn't need to be refrigerated and it can be given as an injection under the skin rather than as an IV infusion. So now if you're a patient, so this all has to go through clinical trials. We're not going from this change overnight, but what this could potentially mean is that as a patient, you can actually now get this injection in your doctor's office without spending an entire day at a hospital, or you could even potentially learn to administer this injection yourself at home. And so that's a huge difference in your quality of life. So this is just one example of how protein crystal growth changes in the zero-G environment can have impacts both for our understanding of how physical sciences works in space, but also can also benefit humans on Earth. So for me, there's two very exciting horizons when we look at the future of space medicine. So the first one is in this era of increased access to space through commercial spaceflight, we have a whole new population of potential patients who are flying to space. And so what I mean by that is if you're flying through a space agency, through NASA, through ISRO, through the Canadian Space Agency, you are typically very, very rigorously screened medically. So you are the healthiest of the healthy physically, physiologically, and psychologically. And so that means the patient population that we have data on has historically been a very, very healthy population. In the new era of access to space through commercial spaceflight, we're seeing folks with medical conditions that may have previously been disqualifying, whether that's diabetes, whether that's changes in vision, whether that's color blindness. And so that gives us a whole new physiological data set to study in this weightless environment and also forces us to change how we prepare for being ready to go to space. The other horizon is also exciting, and that is what is dubbed long duration and exploration class missions. And so the international community currently has its sight set on the moon, Mars, and beyond. And so when we look at the challenges of providing medical care in these environments, looking at the extreme case of Mars, we break that down into what we call the RIDGE framework. So radiation, isolation and confinement, distance from Earth, altered gravity environments, and the environment itself. So that's what RIDGE stands for. And so, for example, when we look at Mars, the average Mars mission profile is about 3 to 5 years. And so that is 3 to 5 years away from Earth, plus the supply chain to Mars. With today's technologies, you have to wait for a favorable launch window. So you have to wait till Earth and Mars are in the right alignment to actually be able to get there in a reasonable time frame. And even then, it takes 6 to 9 months. And then once you get to Mars, even traveling at the speed of light, you have a time delay because the two planets are so far apart. And so at the shortest distance, a round trip communication, you saying hello, me saying hi on Earth and Mars, that is a 6 minute round trip delay because of the distances involved. At its greatest, those distances and that time delay increases to 48 minutes round trip. So now if you have a medical emergency on Mars and you need help, you don't have time to radio back to Earth for assistance because that is valuable time in which your patient may need to be treated. In addition, there's a period of time in which the sun sits between the Earth and Mars, and that means that there is a complete 2 to 3 week communications blackout. So what this means for medicine on Mars is that we need to increase crew autonomy or the crew's ability to work and treat in situ on the planet independently And to do that, we need to look at emerging technologies that can help them, whether it's machine learning and AI for diagnostics and treatment, whether it's biomonitoring or sensors to create early warning systems, whether it's using technologies like virtual reality to help practice medical procedural skills so astronauts don't lose those skills. So it's a very interesting and exciting time in space medicine, and there's just so much on the horizon. So for anyone out there who's listening, who might be interested in this, I really truly think that this is your time, because whatever problem you want to work on in space medicine, there is a niche for that, whether it's neuroscience, technology, women's health, immunology, or more. So, three quick facts about life in space. So, we know that the immune system is compromised, and we don't know exactly why. It could be a combination of access, it could be a combination of exposure to the zero G environment, increased radiation, a very highly stressful schedule. At the same time, we know that germs are more virulent or more powerful in space. Luckily, that hasn't translated into anything of clinical or day-to-day significance. So those are the first two facts. And then the other fact is that when we look at how organisms breed in space, that's also another important area of study. There was this Russian experiment involving cockroaches where they looked at how cockroaches behaved if they were bred and born in space. And what happened with these cockroaches is that they became bigger, they became brightly colored and orange and distorted in their appearance. And then the third most terrifying fact is they became mean and aggressive. So now imagine you're in space and you have an outbreak of the space cockroach colony and it's coming after you. So maybe sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. It feels amazing. I think the smile says it all. I know I have very big shoes to fill looking at the legacies that Kalpana Chawla, Sunita Williams, and Sarisha Bandla have laid forth. I am very much up to the task. I know what this means to so many folks of Indian origin, both within India and abroad. And I very much am looking forward to wearing that hope and that inspiration with pride, and I won't let you down.